Okay, we're ready to begin for those of you who are joining online. Let's open with a word of prayer. Holy God, we want to give you praise and thanks, both for the privilege of being here, of fellowshipping with friends, but also because we have an opportunity to study your word. And be able to experience something that so many others only can dream about. We thank you for the dedication and commitment of past teachers. And we ask that we would continue in their footsteps and study your word carefully. In Jesus' name, amen. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Anna, you're translating a lot faster than Shemaine. I can hear your voice, and if I begin when you finished, if she's lagging, others might lag. We've spoken about various topics during the two presentations that we've had together. They all relate to Matthew chapter 5, Revelation 17, and the theme of adultery. What I want to try to do is give an overview without any definitive proofs. And then go back over these ideas and try to establish them as facts or being correct. So I want to give us 4 Old Testament Bible verses which I may just comment on without dwelling on them. So we have the Old Testament, Hosea chapter 1 verse 2, Ezekiel chapter 16 verse 15, Jeremiah chapter 3 verse 1, and Malachi chapter 2 verse 14. As I say, we're not going to go through those verses today because we need to carefully read them and then discuss the context in which those passages are found. Hosea chapter 1 verse 2. God is speaking through Hosea to God's people, the church. And God's going to do that through a parable with Hosea. And so Hosea now is instructed to marry a prostitute. says that in the verse. Get a wife who's a prostitute. I'm not sure how it reads in different languages. But towards the end of the verse, it says because. Does it say something like that in a different language? Okay, and so the reason for that is because the land has committed great whoredoms or prostitution. And the land has departed from God. So we're not going to discuss the details of that, except to say at a superficial level, I know it says land, but I'm going to say the church has committed fornication and has left God. And to demonstrate that, God's prophet is now required to marry a woman of, it says in the King James, whoredom or of prostitution. So what I want us to see in Hosea chapter 1 is if we were going to use a word, the word that we would use would be fornication. Without going into the Hebrew or discussing it. It doesn't use the word adultery. That's the point I want us to see. We'll go into Ezekiel 16:15. God is speaking to the same church and says, you have played the harlot. You become a prostitute. And you've managed to do that because of your beauty. So, harlot. Again, we're not going into the details, but the implication is that the wife is now behaving as a prostitute. And what she's doing is fornicating herself to other men. In the King James, it explicitly uses the word fornication. Does anybody have any questions so far of what we're doing? Just going to 4 Old Testament passages talking about this idea of, I'm going to call it marital relationship. So we're beginning at Matthew 5 and looking backwards, if I can put it that way. The same issue, a relationship between a man and a woman, when it's described in the Old Testament, in these first 2 verses, is basically described as being fornication. we know in both verses it's specifically speaking about the church and God. Jeremiah chapter 3 verse 1 speaks about a husband putting away his wife, divorcing her. Then it speaks about some details of how that relationship follows on. It describes how bad the crime is of divorce and remarriage, essentially. And then he speaks about the church and its crime. It says the church has played the harlot, has become a prostitute. Has gone to many lovers, and yet her husband is saying that you can come back and we'll make everything okay. So she's become a prostitute, and I'm going to say that this is fornication. Last one, Malachi 2:14. Speaks about the church and God. He speaks about how treacherously the church, Israel, has behaved. So I'm going to call this fornication too. It doesn't explicitly use the word adultery. Then we come to the New Testament, and we are in Matthew 5. I'll just give a single verse, 28, but there are a couple of verses. Uses the word adultery. And then if you go still in the New Testament, we're in Revelation 17 verse 2. It now speaks about fornication. Anybody have any questions? So, if we go a little bit further back in the Old Testament, and I'll give one more Bible verse. Exodus chapter 20. The standard verse that deals with adultery. Verse 14. So we have adultery, fornication, adultery, fornication. So I was asked in the first presentation to review Matthew 5 because I made the argument that it's dealing with the church and God. So Jesus is standing in front of the leadership of the church, speaking to people, and a surface or a literal reading of that sermon so in Matthew 5, Sermon on the Mount, let me try to put it this way. God, Jesus, wants to change the people's focus from the external to the internal. And you'll see that this is a recurring theme in the different aspects of our humanity. So it's going to deal with relationships in different ways. Lying, stealing, cheating, loving, hating. So Jesus wants to not redefine the law. Jesus is not trying to redefine criminality. So in the Old Testament, the way the law is structured is related to the question that we asked in our last presentation. When you're judged, what are you judged upon? Your thoughts. We'll put feelings next to that in parenthesis. Your thoughts or your actions? Your mind or your body? I don't know if we all came to a consensus on that. In the class, I don't think we did. And we didn't really discuss it as a group afterwards. I'm suggesting that the criminality is the physical, the external. That's what marks the crime. That's what marked the crime in the Old Testament. There is no discussion about what you think. It's all about what you do. And yet, when we compare what people call the Old Covenant and the New, that would be the Old Testament and the New Testament. Some people would call it the Law and the Prophets versus the Gospel. When you compare those two dispensations, I'm assuming we're all familiar with the following. Ellen White says in a very matter-of-fact way, in a very simple way, that the new is in fact the old or the original. So she's not the only person. but I'll give her the credit. I'll say Ellen White says the old and the new. I've put testament, but you can put covenant. See, if I put OC, people won't remember what that meant. And she says the New Testament was the old or the original one. Maybe in the language of Paul, this is the law in the heart. And maybe we'll call this the law in action. Curtis.
In Genesis 3:15,
Em Gênesis 3:15,
when that discussion is happening between God and Adam and Eve, and typically we refer to that as the gospel. Is this what Ellen White is referring to?
Is that what Ellen White is referring to? Genesis 3:15. So I'm going to put Genesis 3:15 here. I don't want to say no to your question. So, because I don't have a memory of it. So I'll say yes, Ellen White will refer back to Genesis 3:15. But often what she's going to do is go to the patriarchs, like Abraham and Jacob. When God is creating a people and law, Abraham, Moses, Jacob, etc. The law in action is circumcision in that context. It's a physical act. And Ellen White will point out that for someone like Abraham, there had been an internal work beforehand. So his heart had already been circumcised long before his genitalia were circumcised. But it's the same principle.
So Abraham and the patriarchs we'll say initiate this thought. Or not they, but God initiated this internal work. And then you have the period where Israel as a people is raised up. And that's what you're describing as law in action.
Yes.
Where does Jeremiah fit into that?
Jeremiah, this one? This Jeremiah, or Jeremiah what?
Jeremiah talking about at the end of the captivity there's going to be a new heart, etc. Like, why does he bring that up?
Did you get what he said? Did you translate that?
Why does he bring that? Why does that come up in the midst of, we'll just say, law in action?
I'm going to guess I'm not going to answer your question. So, I think the tension between the law in the heart and the law in action is related to what we spoke about yesterday. What a person can be judged upon. So, I don't want to pin you down. I don't want to put you in the questions in this hot seat. But if you took that model of Jeremiah, new heart, and you look at real life after the Babylonian exile, this flowery talk about new heart, in practice, when you have 1 million people coming back to Israel, does it actually mean anything in day-to-day living? Okay.
So I guess a part of my question is Jeremiah talking individually, or is he talking about Israel as a nation?
So, I'm willing to be corrected, but I'm suggesting, in the same way that Jesus is speaking collectively, so is Jeremiah. So, we're a movement, a group of people, and because we have not yet publicly made the following point, at least in a strong fashion we haven't done that. But if you look at the studies on the nature of humanity over the last 8 years or more, you'll see that the evidence is already there. I just want to pause. I spoke, whenever it was, about the papacy. And I'm suggesting that for a long time, way more than 10 years, we had the evidence right in front of our eyes that the papacy was not going to be a part of end-time prophecy. When I said they're good, it means prophetically they're irrelevant. Politically, they may be relevant, but prophetically, the only relevant good people is this movement. So, my only comment that I wanted to go, I'm making about the papacy now, is that today we're boldly proclaiming who and what they are prophetically. We could have done it a long while ago. When it comes back to what we were discussing now, I think each of us, I don't mean individually, I mean collectively. We have all the information over the last 8 or 9 years from the studies of the nature of humanity to know that we're judged on action, not thought. And what we haven't discussed is the implications of that, which is either knowingly or not knowingly what Curtis is pushing now.
This is a comment / question. You take it how you will.
Isso é comentário barra pergunta.
From what you've just described,
Pelo que você acabou de descrever,
that Jesus and Jeremiah have this way of looking at institutions. And you've spoken about how God, or questioned how God would look at individuals. If you were to look at an institution and think of what the thoughts of an institution would be, it seems to me that that would align with their doctrine, their beliefs.
Yes?
If that's the case, it seems valid and it makes sense why Matthew 5:28 would point you to the thoughts where you couldn't do that to an individual.
Let me try and repackage that. I'm not going to address the issue of the individual and the institution. But I'm going to address it from the point of view of salvation. And this is where, if you call it the ditch or the trap, lies for you. This is why, individually, without you realizing, there has begun to be a gradual change or an upswell, like a wave that swells up, of a new way of looking at, I call it salvation, but I wanted to say new way of looking at things. If I put it this way, don't look at yourself when I say the following. Based upon Matthew 5, when God comes to judge the person, that person is not, cannot be you. Which means you have to undo a lot of concepts and ideas that you have about salvation. These rules can only be applied to a person that we call an institution. Let's just call it a church. Israel, the 144,000. So we don't get bogged down with institutions and things like that. In order, I'll use familiar terms. In order for this movement to be successful, we understand what that means. When God looks at the movement to know if it's successful or if it's a failure, isn't based upon its actions alone. It's based upon its thoughts. If the movement doesn't love keeping the law, but it only goes through the motions of keeping the law, it fails. That model that sounds really simple and correct, because that's what you all believe about yourselves. The rude awakening is it doesn't work for an individual. Which is what I said yesterday. Just smile and hate people and it'll all be good. And that runs counterintuitive to what most of you have understood. Okay? Put your hands up who wanted to say something, because there was a... Now, if you want to say something, put your hands up. Doesn't matter what it is, but you need a mic and I need order. So Michaela and then Matthias.
Sorry. English is very short because it's not a question. The original video is freezing, so we'll...
Original?
The... no, la transmisión, ¿cómo diría? The recording was freezing, and we lost the first part about the movement. You say...
I'm lost, sorry.
Sorry.
You're speaking on behalf of people online?
Exactly, because
Okay.
Cesar can translate.
Which bit do I need to repeat?
La primera parte que hablaba sobre el simbolismo del... Es que no pude escuchar nada, se cortó totalmente. El primer concepto sobre cómo afectaba a nivel institucional y a nivel personal.
For those of you online, Pedro's going to repeat what got frozen in English as though he was speaking what I said.
If I don't have that good memory, I will just say they missed. They missed the implications of when we move from the individual to the institution. It's a key phrase that you did at the beginning.
Are we all good? All done? Not yet?
No, if you could do it.
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it again because I'm going to go over it again anyway. And I can't remember what I said. Matthias.
Individually, we are judged upon our actions and not upon our thoughts. But on an institutional level, we are judged upon our thoughts and não somente sobre ações, and not only upon our actions. How can we know what the thoughts of these institutions are?
It's very difficult because we're weaving symbology, parabolic models with our own humanity. I don't know how God will do that. And I'm not saying these are facts, I'm saying these are my opinions. So I know I didn't answer your question, I apologize. So let me gather us all back together. We've got in the Old Testament adultery, fornication, New Testament adultery, fornication. The Sermon on the Mount. Jesus wants to redirect people's thinking from the external to the internal. The action to the heart. From the fulfillment to the root cause. Then we spoke about Ellen White saying that this New Testament, the law in your heart, the internal, in fact is the original covenant or the original testament. And we can find that in Genesis 3. Then the question was asked, in this history, Jeremiah, you gave the verse. You gave the verse. Someone can check this. We were given Jeremiah 31:33. Which speaks about the experience of Israel after the Babylonian captivity. So I'll just check. So it speaks about a new covenant after those days. The law's going to be put into people's hearts. And we know that this passage is often used to describe the experience of the New Testament. But a careful reading, as Curtis suggested, is actually an Old Testament experience after the Babylonian captivity. So I'm saying, as a matter of factly, just casually, there is no way that 1 million people come out of Babylonian captivity all thinking perfect thoughts. But rather, this is talking about a collective experience, or what we would call the relationship or the experience of the church. Let's think about it this way. Malachi said, you have committed a lot of whoredom. Malachi didn't say the next bit. Malachi 2:14 says you have committed a lot of fornication. Didn't say the next bit. Did not say the next bit. Therefore, I sent you into Babylon as punishment. Come back to Malachi. After that, if you've learnt your lesson, we can be husband and wife again, as though nothing happened. You will love me like you used to at the beginning, and I've always loved you. I, the man, the husband, God, the woman, the wife, Israel, she has to change her ways. Where her affections lie. We'd all understand that to be a new start. We all understand that partners who are married, they're not just supposed to go through the motion, they're actually supposed to be committed to each other. I think that's what's being described in Jeremiah. What I've just said now is not anything new, it's just a repeat of what I said earlier. So, coming back to these 4 steps, or these 4 passages, we know that in Exodus it's talking about real men, real women. In these 4 other Old Testament passages, it's speaking symbolically. It's talking about a real church and a real God, and their relationship is going to be described symbolically as men and women marrying. A marriage going wrong. And it consistently uses the concept of fornication when it does that. Then you come to the New Testament, Matthew 5. So Jesus is going to try to do several things. He wants to correct the thinking of the people. That's everybody. From the feet to the head. And he's going to say what's really important is that you love the law, not practice the law. Killing isn't the issue, murdering somebody. That action has its root in hatred. If you didn't hate, you wouldn't kill. And there are various examples of that. If you didn't look at people's things with a jealous eye, you wouldn't steal from them. If you were happy with what you've got, you wouldn't desire to steal. If you don't look at women in the wrong way, you won't sleep with them. I apologize for all the sexist innuendo in all of that. I understand it, but I'm just reading and quoting the passages as they are. So, all good? So, I've suggested that beyond the real, literal person, like Exodus 20, Jesus is also speaking at a symbolic or a prophetic level. That Jesus is predicting the end, the demise of Israel. And we only focused on adultery, but I think you can see that in the various aspects that are discussed in the Sermon on the Mount. Whatever Jesus' reason for speaking in the way that he did, either he's too scared, for whoever he's scared of and whoever he's scared of. So I'm not saying he's scared for himself. We would probably call that wisdom. So if Jesus is either being prudent or Jesus is scared, all the language is wrapped up in literal human experiences. And therefore, when it comes to our focus of attention, which is verse 28, it's going to use the word adultery, not fornication. And in doing that, we've already discussed that Jesus is now going to broaden the definition of adultery. Anybody and everybody is committing adultery when they do something wrong. So in the Old Testament, a married man, his name is Judah. Sleeps with his daughter in-law, but she's disguised as a prostitute. We all know the story. When they find out she's pregnant, who's the criminal? She is. She's not married. She's widowed. I'm going to call it married, but she's supposed to be married. She's a middle-aged woman. And now she's supposed to be, I'm going to call it married to a young man. And Judah doesn't like that. So he wangles, he makes it happen so it doesn't work out. She feels cheated. So she dresses as a prostitute, which means she knows what her father-in-law is really like. Which in and of itself is disgusting. He's a dirty old man, we would call him today. She goes to the right place at the right time, captures him, he sleeps with her, and makes the necessary payments. No crime has been committed. Married man can sleep with a prostitute to relieve himself. However disgusting that sounds to all of us. So, you know the rest of the story. New Testament. Matthew 5. Someone knows the Bible verse for the Judah story, they can give it to me. I'll put it here. Matthew 5, married man with a prostitute. So this is no law broken. In the Old Testament. According to the broader definition that we now have in Matthew 5, has the law been broken now? The law of adultery. So in the Old Testament, there's no adultery. In the New Testament, we have adultery spilling out of our ears. So there's been a fundamental change. Back in the day, we might develop an argument that this is a form of pornography. All those dances that those women were doing in front of the kings at a feast, that definitely was pornography. So you can see today why pornography is a severe crime. Just from Matthew 5. You don't have to look at the brutality and the how women are treated. You don't have to look at all of that. Just Matthew 5 will show you how bad it is. We've gone from Exodus to the prophets to Matthew. And now we're in Revelation 17. Why does it say fornication? So, before we answer that question, in Revelation 17, do we have a married man who's sleeping with a prostitute? You might argue that you don't know if the kings are married or not. That's a fair point. If they are married, is this fornication in Revelation 17:2? Or is it adultery? It's adultery, yes? Because it has to comply with the new way of understanding the law. In the New Testament, the adultery has a much more broader definition. So it's adultery. I think we all can agree with that. So if it's adultery, why does John call it fornication? Does John know it's adultery? Maybe not, someone said. So either John is ignorant, or some other reason. We do know that he was there at the Sermon on the Mount 70 years ago, when he was a young person. So we do know that. So we'd have to assume that he was there, didn't understand what Jesus was talking about, and didn't learn anything for the next 70 years. Or he chose not to use the word adultery. So we've got some assumptions in our story. We're assuming that the kings are married. We're assuming that it's adultery that's going on. And we're assuming, or we're going to ask the question whether or not John knows that it's adultery or not. So the only way you can answer those questions, I'm going to suggest, is through methodology. So, as I said, we're going to go over this in more detail. But what I want to suggest is the following. John knows what he's talking about. We'll make that premise. And the kings are married. In Exodus, he's talking about real people, uses the word adultery. When it comes to churches, kingdoms, and their relationship with God, it uses the word fornication. So when it moves away from an individual, I call it to a movement, the word changes. We have evidence of that. The New Testament, Matthew 5, I'm not disagreeing that Jesus is speaking about real people. But the ramifications has to be understood institutionally or corporately. And that's why Jesus talks literally about adultery as much as Jesus talks literally about stealing. And literally about killing. When we come to Revelation 17, this is not a literal story. It's not a literal woman. And even though you might develop an argument that those kings are literal, often enough they're not. So Revelation 17 is symbolic, just as much as these Old Testament prophets are speaking about symbology. John knows all of that, and that's why he's going to choose to use the word fornication. Because if he'd used the word adultery, both to his audience, those New Testament Christians, and worse, us, we would have got confused. And we would have gone into those verses and misunderstood what they meant. So John's forced to use the word fornication, knowing full well that this is really adultery. So this is not a complete proof or defense of why this is what's being taught today. But it lays forth the logic upon which the statements that have already been made are built upon. Curtis, and then Daniel.
Maurice? That's good. I don't know if this is correct or not. But when you trace adultery throughout the Old Testament, the context in which it's used seems to be related to something about the covenant that God has with a covenant. A covenant being broken. And so God, the authors will refer to it as adultery. But then when the word fornication is used, there's something implied about an alliance between the fornicators. I think John is deliberate, as you said. Perhaps to raise the point that there's an alliance going on between the king and the woman. So, yeah.
Did everybody understand what Curtis's point was? Whether it was right or wrong, he's not saying that it's correct. I think he said the following. Adultery compared to fornication, when it's fornication, the two people who are doing whatever they're doing eyes are open, they're in agreement, and he used the word alliance, so I'm going to use that word. Even if I spell it wrong. Double L, is it? I thought it was. Adultery, I'm just going to call it a mistake. You can get beguiled or into something and you don't know how you got there. Is that fair assessment of what you said, or you want to have it made things worse?
I'm not sure if I would frame it as mistake or beguiled or etc., because I don't want to take away the fact that in 17 it is adultery. It was just, I think John has a perspective and he wants to point to that perspective without denying the other.
I know he used the word covenant. I didn't understand what that meant. I'll leave this as a question. Daniel.
So, look into the definition of adultery and fornication.
So looking at what? Sorry, looking at
the definition of adultery and fornication. Adultery is when you have at least one person married and this person has sexual relationship with someone, with another person. Fornication refers to people who have consensuous relationship and they are single. So they don't have any alliance like a marriage. So adultery, you are breaking an alliance, and fornication, you just don't have anything. On Revelation 17 verse 5, it says that it's written, mother of harlots. A harlot doesn't have a marriage, doesn't have a alliance with anybody. She might be commuting fornication, while the beast, if the kings of the earth has a marriage, an alliance with someone, if we assume they are married, they are committing adultery. But as she does not have any alliance, it's a fornication. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm not sure if I agree. He's married, and he's having sex with a prostitute. Is he committing adultery?
Yes.
She, single woman, is sleeping with a married man. She committing adultery. Is she committing adultery?
She's not breaking her alliance.
She's breaking his alliance.
So you mean she's guilty as well?
The act is an act of adultery
For him,
because one of the parties is married.
I agree. Yeah, it makes sense. But what if she doesn't know that he's married?
What we have to establish in order to have this to be adultery is that he's married.
Correct.
Because if he's not married, it's fornication.
It makes sense. I agree. If it's act of adultery because alliance is being broken. Correct.
So there are certain things that need to be put into place. One of them is to establish that the kings are married. And John knows what he's speaking about. So if they're married, and John is clever, why does he not call it adultery? So there are several questions that need to be answered. And I've alluded to some of those already. I've suggested the answers to some of them.
Who are the kings married to?
Their wives.
Who are they?
Who are their wives?
Yeah.
The same thing as the woman, the prostitute. It's the good version of her.
Okay.
Anybody else got any questions besides Curtis? Because I just want to give other people. Joanne and then Raymond.
Can we say that John was trying? Was trying? No, was trying. Pull apart the religious part.
I don't know, but I suspect is happening because John knows that this is a symbolic relationship. I'm going to say this as a fact, but it can only be a suggestion at the moment. John knows that if you're going to talk about symbolic things, you have to use the word fornication and you cannot use the word adultery. Because contextually, I'll call it prophetically, if you were to use the word adultery, it would give the wrong answer, the wrong impression. And when you're speaking about kingdoms, nations, institutions, fornication is the correct word. Raymond?
What I'm going to say, I should have said it earlier on in the study, but I didn't want to break how the study was developing. When we look at Matthew 5, literal adultery is lost spiritually. That's the moral aspect. With the prophetic, when we look at adultery in Revelation 17, or the term fornication, that's a symbolic symbol. So the application will become the literal. So therefore, fornication is, I would say, spiritual in Revelation as the symbol, and how it plays out is going to be literal. And I want to say, I think that's why the whore is judged, because of what it's doing literally.
That's why the whore is being judged, because of what she's literally doing. Yeah. Is that what you said? Thank you. Last point that you wanted to make, Curtis, on Daniel, then we'll close.
I think we need to be careful of using modern dictionary definitions for these Greek terms that are used. For instance, fornication is just a sexual crime. It's an umbrella term in the Bible. And adultery will fit into that. Doesn't carry the implication of two separate and distinct meanings.
Okay. Hope that helped people. Let's pray. A comment? If we're allowed to. Gabriel's going to make their last comment, because it's his camp.
I don't know if you recall, Elder Jeffs used to use an expression in regard to Daniel and the daily about the switch of gender. He was saying Was Daniel careful, a careful or a careless writer?
Careful or careless writer?
But I think, as you said, we have to use methodology to come to that conclusion about John.
Am I allowed to give Michaela the last say or no? Yeah. Michaela, did you want to say?
These two words are two points of view of the same event or evento. Yes, in my understanding, these two words are the different points of view of the same event. Because at least in Spanish, adulterio is similar to adulterar. Adulterar means when something is corrupting or with contamination. And fornication for me is the literal action of this event. For example, you have fornication when you have some sexual relationship with out of marriage. And adultery maybe means when you make this action, you are corrupting your pact, your alliance, your deal in your marriage. Fornication obviously is the same, but for me fornication is the action and adultery is the meaning. Yes, the consequence, the meaning of corrupting your deal, your marriage, is how I understand.
I hope that helped people. Let's pray. Holy God, we thank you that we can have the opportunity to share our thoughts and our ideas. But as these thoughts and ideas come together, that they can be distilled and purified so that we might have the truth of what Revelation 17 is speaking of. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.